Sophia's home was a small, cozy haven tucked away in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The house was modest but warm, with soft beige walls, a fireplace that crackled on chilly evenings, and large windows that let in the golden light of the setting sun. It was a place where time seemed to slow down, and life felt simple. Sophia, a strikingly beautiful woman with curves that turned heads and a confidence that commanded attention, had lived here for years. At 42, she was a woman who knew what she wanted and wasn't afraid to go after it. Her provocative red dress hugged her figure perfectly, a testament to her bold personality. Ethan, her 25-year-old adopted son, was the opposite in many ways. Tall, athletic, and effortlessly handsome, he had a laid-back charm that made him popular with everyone he met. He wore casual jeans and a t-shirt most days, his style as relaxed as his demeanor. Despite their differences, Sophia and Ethan shared a bond that was unshakable. They had been through a lot together, and their relationship was built on trust, mutual respect, and a deep, unspoken love. Their days were filled with simple routines. Sophia would wake up early, brew a pot of coffee, and sit by the window, watching the world wake up. Ethan would join her later, his hair still messy from sleep, and they'd share breakfast in comfortable silence. They talked about everything: work, life, dreams, but there was always an undercurrent of something more, a tension neither of them acknowledged. Evenings were their favorite time. After dinner, they'd sit on the porch, sipping wine and watching the stars. Sophia would laugh at Ethan's jokes, her voice warm and melodic, and he'd smile at her, his eyes lingering a little too long. There was an unspoken chemistry between them, a connection that went beyond mother and son. But they never acted on it, content to live in the moment and enjoy each other's company. Life was peaceful, predictable, and perfect in its own way. But beneath the surface, emotions were simmering, waiting for the right moment to boil over. The rain poured relentlessly that night, the rhythmic tapping against the windows creating a soothing yet eerie backdrop. Ethan stumbled through the front door, drenched and exhausted. His day had been grueling, long hours at work, a missed deadline, and a boss who seemed to take pleasure in his stress. He kicked off his muddy shoes and sighed, running a hand through his wet hair. Sophia, lounging on the couch in her signature red dress, looked up from her book. Her eyes softened as she took in his disheveled state. "You look like you've been through a war," she teased, her voice warm and inviting. Ethan managed a tired smile. "Feels like it." She stood, her movements graceful, and walked over to him. "Come on, let's get you warmed up." She led him to her bedroom, the one place in the house that felt like a sanctuary. The room was dimly lit, the soft glow of a bedside lamp casting shadows on the walls. "Lie down," she instructed gently, gesturing to her bed. Ethan hesitated for a moment but then complied, sinking into the soft mattress with a groan. Sophia sat beside him, her hand brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "You need to take better care of yourself," she murmured, her voice tinged with concern. Ethan's eyes fluttered shut, the warmth of her touch soothing his frayed nerves. But as the minutes passed, the atmosphere shifted. Sophia's hand lingered on his face, her thumb tracing the curve of his cheek. Ethan's breathing slowed, and he turned slightly, his face now inches from hers. Neither of them spoke. The air between them was charged with an unspoken tension, a magnetic pull that neither could ignore. Sophia's heart raced, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She knew this was wrong, but the way he looked at her, vulnerable, longing, made it hard to think straight. Ethan's hand reached up, his fingers brushing against hers. "Sophia," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the rain. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned in closer, her breath mingling with his. The moment hung in the air, fragile and electric. Then, without warning, Ethan closed the gap between them, his lips brushing against hers in a tentative kiss. Sophia froze, her mind screaming at her to stop. But her body betrayed her. She kissed him back, the intensity of the moment overwhelming her senses. It was wrong, so wrong, but it felt undeniably right. The rain outside seemed to fade into the background as they lost themselves in each other, the line between mother and son blurring in the heat of the moment. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Sophia and Ethan tried to go back to their normal routines. But the kiss had changed everything. It lingered in the air between them. A secret neither could forget. They avoided each other's eyes. Their conversations stiff and awkward. The once comfortable silence now felt heavy, charged with unspoken words and forbidden desires. Sophia found herself replaying the moment in her mind. Her heart torn between guilt and longing. She knew it was wrong. But the memory of his lips on hers sent shivers down her spine. She tried to distract herself, cleaning the house, reading, even taking long walks, but nothing could erase the way he made her feel. Ethan, on the other hand, was a mess. He couldn't focus at work. His mind constantly drifting back to that night. He'd catch himself staring at Sophia when she wasn't looking. His heart racing at the sight of her. He wanted to talk to her, to understand what it meant. But the words stuck in his throat. The tension between them grew with each passing day. Small gestures, a brush of hands, a lingering glance, sent sparks flying. They were walking on a tightrope. One wrong move away from falling into the abyss. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, the silence became unbearable. Ethan turned to Sophia, his voice trembling with emotion. "We need to talk about what happened." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. She knew this conversation was inevitable. But she wasn't ready. "Ethan, no," he interrupted, his eyes pleading. "Please, just, tell me how you feel." Sophia hesitated, her mind racing. She wanted to tell him the truth. To confess the feelings she'd been hiding for so long. But the fear of losing him, of ruining what they had, held her back. "It was a mistake," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan's face fell, his heart shattering into a million pieces. "A mistake?" Sophia nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "We can't do this. Ethan, it's wrong." Ethan looked away, his jaw clenched in frustration. "Maybe it's wrong, but it doesn't feel like a mistake to me." The air between them was thick with tension, their emotions raw and unfiltered. Sophia reached out, her hand trembling as she touched his arm. "Ethan, please, we need to stop this before it destroys us." Ethan pulled away, his heart aching with unspoken words. He stood up, his voice cold and distant. "I need some time alone." Sophia watched him walk away, her heart breaking with every step. She knew she'd hurt him, but she had no choice. The line they'd crossed was too dangerous, and the consequences too great. The tension between Sophia and Ethan had reached a boiling point, and just when it seemed like things couldn't get more complicated, Daniel arrived. Daniel was Sophia's ex-husband and Ethan's father. He had been out of their lives for years, traveling the world as a freelance photographer. His sudden return was unexpected, to say the least. Sophia opened the door to find him standing there, his signature leather jacket slung over one shoulder and a cocky grin on his face. "Hey, Soph," he said, his voice smooth and confident. Sophia's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't seen him in over a decade. And yet, here he was, looking as charming as ever. "Daniel," she managed to say, her voice tinged with surprise. Ethan, who had been brooding in his room, heard the commotion and came downstairs. His eyes widened when he saw his father. "Dad?" Daniel's grin widened as he pulled Ethan into a bear hug. "Hey, kid, look at you, all grown up." The reunion was bittersweet. Ethan had always resented his father for leaving, but seeing him again stirred up emotions he thought he'd buried. Sophia, on the other hand, was conflicted. Daniel had a way of stirring up old feelings, and his presence only added to the chaos in her life. Over the next few days, Daniel made himself at home. He was charming, funny, and effortlessly drew people in. He tried to reconnect with Ethan, taking him out for drinks and reminiscing about the past. But Ethan couldn't shake the resentment he felt. Sophia watched them from a distance, her heart torn. She knew Daniel's return was complicating things, but she couldn't deny the pull she still felt toward him. One evening, as they sat on the porch sharing a bottle of wine, Daniel turned to Sophia, his expression serious. "I've missed you, Soph," he said, his voice soft. Sophia's heart raced. She wanted to tell him she'd missed him too, but the words caught in her throat. "Daniel, We can't just pick up where we left off, she said, her voice trembling. Daniel reached out, his hand brushing against hers. Why not? We were good together. Sophia pulled away, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. Things are different now. I'm different. Daniel leaned in closer, his eyes searching hers. Give me a chance, Soph. Let me make things right. Sophia's heart ached with the weight of his words. She wanted to believe him, to let herself fall back into the comfort of his arms. But the memory of Ethan's kiss lingered in her mind, a reminder of the tangled web of emotions she was caught in. The days that followed were a blur of emotions and decisions. Sophia, Ethan, and Daniel were caught in a web of unresolved feelings, each grappling with their own desires and fears. Sophia knew she had to make a choice, between the man who had once been her everything and the man who had awakened something new and forbidden in her. But every time she thought she had made up her mind, doubt crept in. Ethan, too, was torn. He wanted to hate his father for leaving, but Daniel's charm and attempts to reconnect made it hard to hold onto that anger. And then there was Sophia. The memory of their kiss haunted him, a constant reminder of the line they'd crossed. Daniel, for his part, was determined to win Sophia back. He knew he'd made mistakes in the past, but he believed they could start over. He poured his heart out to her, promising to be the man she deserved. One evening, as the three of them sat in the living room, the tension was palpable. Sophia finally broke the silence. We can't keep living like this, she said, her voice steady but laced with emotion. Ethan and Daniel both looked at her, their expressions a mix of hope and fear. What are you saying? Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sophia took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. I need time. Time to figure out what I want. Who I want. I can't keep hurting both of you, or myself. Daniel reached out, his hand hovering over hers. Sophia, no, she interrupted, her voice firm. I need space. Daniel, please. Daniel nodded, his heart heavy with disappointment. He stood up, his shoulders slumped, and walked out of the room. Ethan stayed behind, his eyes searching Sophia's. What about us? He asked, his voice trembling. Sophia's heart ached at the pain in his voice. I don't know, Ethan, she admitted. I need to figure things out. Ethan nodded, his heart breaking. He wanted to fight for her, to tell her how much she meant to him. But he knew she needed this. He stood up, his eyes filled with unshed tears, and walked away. Sophia sat alone in the quiet room, her mind racing. She knew she'd hurt both of them, but she also knew she couldn't keep living in this limbo. She had to find herself, to figure out what she truly wanted.